And welcome to another great episode of Tampa Fishing Outfitters Live Fishing Report. Myself, Captain Travis, Captain Jason, Captain James.
Yo.
In the studios, going to talk a little fishing. We appreciate you joining us tonight. If you haven't already, like the show, like the page, share it. See if we can get a couple more new faces in here on the show to join us.
Yeah,
and,
man. We like talking to new people and the old ones. Thank you for watching over the years.
Yeah. Josh Myers is watching. Haven't seen him tune in before.
Nice.
Good deal.
So what's going on, boys?
You see it, man.
We've been busy.
It's been busy. I tell you, the nice thing over the last few days fishing has been the weather.
Yeah.
The weather's been nice. The bite's been nice.
Is it spring or is it January?
The bite's been nice. Bait's been fairly easy.
Yeah.
And then, the weather conditions have been nice, kind of letting you run around and
yeah.
Get to some different places.
Doing maybe in January.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we do have another cold front coming in. It's moving in on us right now.
It's not a super strong one, though.
It's not super strong, but they're calling for like high 30s over the next couple nights, I think.
Is
what I saw.
low?
Yeah, that's
I
what I saw.
I didn't really check it today because I don't have anything coming up
on one of the reports now. Yeah, those could be all different depending on who you.
Yeah, it's a little chilly out there tonight. I think tomorrow's supposed to be cold. I don't have a trip till Saturday as of now. A guy just called me. I might go Friday, but so yeah, it's I don't know. For me, we're getting in that in between spring and just got done with all the winter break stuff. So it's gonna slow down a little bit, I think, for everybody in general. But yeah, hey guys, the fishing's been great. If you'd like to get out, I know all three of us are kind of slow the next couple of weeks. We'd love to get any of you guys out and do some fishing.
And the fishing's
been
really
on fire, man. I mean,
I think
for me still, like I've still been chasing tide bites. I mean, there are some periods we've had some really low tides, and so not to say that you couldn't find fish in certain areas, but in some of the places that I like to fish this time of year, some of it's tide dependent. In other words, like I like the incoming tide. When the water's completely blown out, there's some areas that I'll go fish, and when some of those areas don't turn on, like during the slack tides, you're kind of wanting that incoming water to start moving in on you,
right,
to kind of change the situation to where those fish will actually feed. And so we're catching fish consistently, but for me, I still think like with the trout and even some of the snook bites that we've been on, some of it's still been pretty tide dependent, or better when the tide is moving.
Right.
We've definitely seen a significant change in the bite, particularly with the trout fishing. I've noticed for me in the areas that I've been trout fishing, I'm actually fishing the rips. So like you can look in the water and you'll see like a slick, in some of these bays and some of these areas. And when you see that over a big area, I'll fish right in those rips. That's where I'll kind of focus. And as the tide changes, and it'll kind of switch directions, and we'll kind of follow that. But it seems like those bigger aggregation of trout are sitting in those tidal zones, in those big areas.
I've seen kind of the same thing where I've been at and spending a lot of time like we have this last week, being out there every day and kind of watching that tide change by about an hour every day. At some point, you got to kind of figure out a new plan. So being out there, we've been able to kind of dial it in. But I have noticed that rip, especially when it's going into the little pools, when that tide first starts coming in, they want to be right there where the water's kind of dumping over the flat into that deeper stuff. And then I've also been in there in those same zones before the tide starts moving or when the tide's done moving and, haven't been able to get them to chew.
Quite as good.
Like you can on that moving water.
Yeah, I've been snook fishing.
Yeah. I've been doing a lot of that too.
Yeah, the snook bite's been good.
The snook bite's been good.
Haven't caught a lot of big ones.
That's what I was gonna say. Is it's more of a juvenile action type.
Yeah,
there's a few big ones, but we had a 28 the other day, 27.
Yeah.
None of the real big. I've saw them. I tell you what I meant to tell you guys, and you of all people would just been like, wow. It's the first time I've ever seen it actually happen. We were fishing in Cockroach Bay, and there's some areas where there's some bigger snook. They're obviously hard. I mean, like 40, 42 inches. Hard to get to eat, and we're sitting there and catching snook, and I said, let's move over here, and we're going to try a different spot. I knew it was going to be a little bit slower on the consistency of fish, but I was trying to get some redfish, actually, which we caught some nice upper slot reds this week. And I looked out of the corner of my eye, and I was like, I thought it was a porpoise. And then I looked again, about a 40 to plus. I mean, I don't know how big it was. Huge. But it was big enough where I thought it might have been a porpoise, like the wake and stuff. Snook comes out of the water.
It just rolls.
Gills flared. I'm talking like, if I'd had a camera like to catch the shot, it was just like, and I'm like, oh my God.
What just happened?
Comes out like, and a big snook usually won't just bring their head. This fish came out of the water with a mullet, a big old mullet, and just threw it. I don't know what happened. If he ate the mullet and then he threw the mullet out, but the mullet was flying out of his mouth, and I mean, this thing just
probably
walked.
trying to catch
porpoise
it.
style, yeah.
Yeah, it was the coolest thing I've seen. I'm not gonna say ever, but in a long time.
Top 10.
Yeah, without being hooked, like the fish just kind of free jumped, like
free feeding, doing it.
Yeah, it was cool. Like out of nowhere, like I was like, this is the coolest thing. My customer saw it
Did
too.
anybody else see it?
Yeah, the customer
Okay,
did.
because I'm gonna need some.
Yeah.
Oh, now you're trying to say I'm delirious, right? Look, I would have thought it too,
Yeah.
but then the customer's like, oh, let's throw over there. I'm like, yeah, okay.
Fish story.
He's eating a mullet like this, and I got bait like this.
You need a 12-inch mullet.
Let me
Yeah.
ask you guys, did you notice a considerable increase in water clarity over the last couple of days where you've been at?
Yeah.
For sure.
Like
Yeah.
considerable.
River's still got a lot of
Yeah.
fresh water, but it's fishable.
Yeah.
We talk about that, and this is something that Jason and I have talked about for years now. About this time of year,
Mhm.
is you get the flushes. So you get those really low tides
Yep.
mixed with cool, clean water. That's sort of been filtered, and you start to basically just clean these areas.
Yeah.
Especially the backcountry.
Mhm.
Once you get back, in some of the areas in Cockroach Bay, and one of the things, if you notice, even by the boat ramp, I pulled the boat the last couple of times that I fished, and I fished, or not fished, but I took the boat out of the boat ramp, and you could see 10, 12 feet out the back of the boat ramp.
Yeah.
At Cockroach Bay.
Yep.
And just there you'll notice the difference. But then the flats, if you are doing any flats fishing this time of year,
It's clear.
Mhm.
that's the time when you start changing the tactics. If you're going to trout fish or
Sure.
even snook or redfish, up in the real skinny water,
For sure, Ken.
you kind of downsize everything and take a little stealthier approach to fish in those areas. The fish start seeing the shadows, they start feeling your wakes. They see the shadow of the line, the lure,
even. Yeah.
et cetera. You start leading those fish more. So you're right. I mean, everything in that particular pattern has definitely changed. I mean, the water's super
That
clear.
happened to us yesterday after I left you guys, or after I left you at the, I think it was, yesterday. Sorry, my days are a little mixed up. But picked my group up. We went and, this is a group that fished with me last week, and they were less about putting some meat in the cooler, just wanted to go have a good time.
Yeah.
So I took them over to an area that I hit a few times lately and got in there. I was blown away. I mean, coming in through this hole, it's, a good 4 feet deep, and you really haven't been able to make out what's going on at the bottom. But those fish have been there. And then I pulled in, and I mean, it was gin clear. And I instantly thought, uh-oh, it's going to be tough.
Right.
And it was for, a half hour or so. We really couldn't get any fish to eat. And then we figured out that, everything moved as shallow as it possibly could. All these snook moved as shallow as they possibly could, crystal clear, see them from a mile away. And, I mean, these are folks that have limited fishing experience, and all of a sudden, really good bite and they get into sight fishing conditions where they're putting a bait to a fish in 10 to 12 inches of water, and in order for them to eat, we kept throwing these baits and they're just going in the grass. You can't get them to eat. And I'm like, pop it out of the grass. Every time these guys are popping out of the grass, a snook is just jumping on it. So that was really cool. I hadn't really seen that, ever come to fruition with live bait, let's say, or fishing white baits or greenbacks. But we had them going for a couple hours where it was just one after another. They're sight fishing, so only 2 could be up front, so it's a little tricky for 4, but everybody's sitting there watching what's going on. So it's cool.
I think that's aimed at you.
What does it say?
What's the monthly membership at Snap Jam?
I don't know, Chris, man. Come on down, dude. We'll
Chris,
get
you
in there, bro.
Chris, you could drop a few LBs, bro.
Yeah, bro. Come on in, dog.
Yep.
I think if you drop a few LBs, you might get a few more miles per hour out of that old yellowfin, son.
That's funny.
Oh, he did call you out.
I think
That's
it's
pretty
like
funny.
$15 a month on it. I think.
They give it to Travis for free, man.
So
he brings them some food.
Team Snap, baby.
Team Snap.
But you know what's cool about those medium-sized snook is they're acting like bigger fish right now with these conditions. A 25-inch fish is giving you a little bit bigger fight than they're used to. So it's been fun. I think you see that with 68, 70-degree weather, cool or clean water.
What, man? Am I getting hammered
Oh,
here?
God.
Oh,
Captain
gosh.
Snap.
Jeez, everybody's on you.
Hey, bro.
Captain Snap Fitness.
Meet me at the Snap.
Yeah.
We're talking fishing and
God.
working out.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But anyway, no, you're right, man. The only other time of the year that I say that we can do that is really, really early spring. And I know you do it as much as I do, but you'll get in some areas, particularly around the Cockroach Bay area. And it's kind of a magical thing that happens, and what you'll find is when those snook finally make their way and really push hard into the river, if they do, but when they come back out, if you're out fishing in those days when these larger schools of fish are literally moving edge to edge, point to point, kind of working their way back out to the flats, and you can catch them on some of these underhangs and shallow points in the springtime, and it's the same deal. It's right before the water starts muddying back up with the heat and the rains, and you can sight fish them just like that. And it's sort of the reverse mentality where they've sort of been deprived of a lot of live bait through our winter if we have it, and then they're seeing these baits come out in the spring, and they're just little wrecking balls. I mean,
jump all over it. Yeah.
You're catching fish literally. If a customer throws a bait out, reels it in, and leaves it over the side, you're catching fish like coming up to your boat. And
they'll come up and get it just about anywhere.
It can be really cool, especially with snook. I mean, if you can get a redfish bite like that, it's just epic. But to get a snook bite, I'd say it's more common, but it's still just as gnarly when you get it going, especially for customers, especially for clients that are inexperienced with inshore, saltwater fishing, or let's say they've came from lakes and like deep water fishing, where they generally don't get to see the fish strike the bait, or they can't see what they're fishing for until they get it up. A lot of those guys are really fired up when they, even if it's a 18, 20-inch snook.
Yeah, to see it unfold,
to see the whole process take place is kind of neat. And most of the time they jerk the bait out of their mouth first couple times, But once you get the hang of it, man, it's pretty.
Yeah, the first
cool.
time, because I'm not used to seeing that happen with a boat full of 4 anglers all pitching live bait. That's generally artificials, 1 or 2 guys on a boat, or so when it first happened, I was actually holding the rod, and I started reeling a bait back, trying to make a cast for one of the younger ladies that was on the boat, and the snook, just shot out from this oyster bar, darted and ate the bait. I wasn't paying attention. I was like, okay, so that's what they're doing. So we kind of changed the game and started doing that, and they just had a blast watching that happen. And there weren't any trophies. We got some. There were trophies in there, and we had our chances. We had a few pulls, where you kind of take that bait from them a little quick. Because if it wasn't moving, if it wasn't on the reel, or it wasn't popped out of the weeds,
they didn't want anything to do with it.
And they were hitting chum the same way. It was kind of that first 5 seconds. If it didn't happen, same thing.
Game over.
But yeah, good fishing now that with those clear conditions, I noticed, I'd been rolling over and kind of getting on these trout. I noticed they kind of evacuated that zone I'd been fishing, and we ended up having to find them in a completely different area. that I'm used to fishing like this time of year. But we kind of been getting them more in a spring pattern.
I have not caught a lot of trout in clean, clear water areas.
Right.
It's sort of been, the trout fishing's been more deep, muddy, stained type situations, and the redfish and the snook have been up in the shallowest parts
Clean
of the bays or the flat or whatever you're on. The redfish that I was telling you about the other day, they were tucked up, way up under those bushes. I mean, the second you could get your boat up under there, if you're casting a bait, you want it to go up in the trees or by them.
Sure.
And they're sitting up in those clean water, troughs that are just along the mangroves, and running around in the skiff, you can kind of see some of that, like where on the low tide they'll push out, but the second they can belly crawl and get up over that vast area, the difference between the bar and the bushes, they're coming across. They're not really stopping a whole bunch, and they're going straight to those mangrove shorelines and feeding. A lot on mangrove crabs, I'm sure, and shrimp and other food sources that have been trapped up under there.
Yeah, because there's not many bait fish under there right now.
So
I tell you that the smaller bait we've been getting, I kind of like. I kind of like. Well, it's given me some more options with the red. I've caught more reds this week than I typically would have thought. We caught a bunch of rat reds the other day, which was, I had these guys 2 days. The second day we caught a bunch of snook. They're like, well, we want to do catch some reds. I'm like, all right. So I dipped off in the river and I hit one particular spot. I was like, there's typically some reds in every cast. We were getting them. Like it was almost like we're fishing with shrimp, but we wasn't. With a weight with a white bait. So the smaller white bait's been pretty nice. I think it gives you more options with actual getting a variety and catching numbers.
Yeah.
You might not get all the big fish, but it's been good.
The bait mix has been decent. There's some good ones in there. There's nothing huge.
It's been a little different.
Yeah, but it's
one day I get all small,
yeah.
and it's just one of them years where we're throwing the 1/4-inch nets. It is what it is, man. And you're just gonna have to throw the 1/4-inch net. It is.
Travis put a comment on here. He said, I thought I was a really good fisherman in the spring. Then summer came around.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
go cut bait, man.
For the folks that follow our show and our program here, I mean, we're pretty real about it. And if you've sort of watched us through, a solid year of the seasons changing, we kind of talk about that, how it does happen gradually, but there becomes a point where if you look back over the last few weeks, you've changed a substantial amount.
Absolutely.
But it's sometimes it's a gradual change of how we start to fish, and not only the fish that we fish for, but the techniques and the areas that we go fishing in. The springtime, a lot of times everybody's inshore fishing. The redfish, snook, trout is sort of the deal. And then once that water temperature really starts to get up in the backcountry, it's not that there's not fish there. You just really have to, in my opinion, play the tides and the weather and the areas that you're going to fish. I mean, a lot of fish evacuate certain areas, particularly areas that get really shallow. And so we'll focus more bay fishing, but then that's when the tarpons show up and we start snapper fishing, and then, the gag grouper game starts, kingfish and mackerel. So it's not that we're any better fishermen during the summer. It's just we sort of change our tactics and what we're going after to kind of remain successful to a certain degree.
Yep.
We always have days where you go inshore and you catch a bunch of redfish, or you catch a good snook bite, or you get a few trout. It happens, but more often than not, we're focusing on what's probably a little more predictable as a fishing charter, or as a guide, to put people on fish and have a good time. So to answer your question, Travis, you're probably not any worse of a fisherman or any better than a fisherman of us. It's just if you don't change that pattern and switch up, what you're fishing for and how you're doing it, you're not going to see the same success you saw in the spring.
Yeah, that temperature change when it comes in the summer. You touched on it, cut bait. I mean, fish are going to slow way down. Now that's not to say you can't catch fish on the live baits, but it affects them. I mean, if you think about how mowing the lawn in 65 degrees is a lot different than mowing it in 98 degrees, right? You're a lot less motivated when it's that warm to get up and do anything.
Try to eat a sandwich, at 150 degrees.
So, a lot of that,
a lot of that do that every day.
I can't.
All right, let's rephrase that.
Yeah.
Go get you a Marion's full sub.
Well,
and then
you
eat
got-
that in the summer. That's gonna be hard. I think Travis could do it.
Talking
He's
my-
trying to act like he's
talking
all
my
Mr.
stomach.
I can
Snap.
do it. I've got no.
Talking
He's trying to act like he's all Mr. Snap
My
Fitness
stomach
now.
might
I'll
hurt.
just do it at a slower pace.
Right, you gotta
know?
leave it on the deck for
Yeah.
a while, and I'll creep by.
Yeah.
Kind of like I baited you up in Louisiana. You gotta
did.
put it around
You got
me.
me.
Let me smell it a
You
little
got
bit,
me. You
and
got
I'll
me.
kind of ease over.
I'm not even denying that.
There's a question. We're talking about the shallow water, and
Hey, what's up with our computer? Another update?
Yeah, it's going through an update. Well, at the break,
I
we'll
think
reset
Microsoft
this.
has got they got a mission out to mess with Travis's computers.
Let's answer this question for Manny. He's talking specifically, it looks like, about the Canyon Bay
Let's
draft, because we're talking about this shallow water,
Lottery.
kind of sight fishing. He wants to know what kind of draft you're getting out. He saw one the other day and was really impressed by that.
Well, I mean, I would say a legit foot.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's all going to depend on, like any other boat. It's going to depend on how you're loaded, your fuel, how many anglers you have.
Right.
But, in a foot of water, I feel pretty comfortable putting the trolling motor down and getting through areas. Not that I can't get through some of those areas, maybe a little bit shallower, because a lot of times, you have, hit dips and valleys and
Sure.
So,
It's
so
not
you're
gonna be a
That's
straight-
a loaded
straight
question, though, because depends how many clients do you have, how full is your tank.
Yeah,
I mean, because you're getting technical when you're putting a 24-foot
Well,
boat.
And that's
And
why I say about a foot of water.
Right.
I mean, I'd say plus or minus a legit. Now,
And on your boat,
when-
is it a front tank boat? Is it a rear tank
well,
boat?
mine's a
'Cause
rear
it-
tank. So
Yeah, so yours is going to draft
How
a
many
little
of your
more.
clients will move up to
a
the
little
front?
different. But, here's
Did your
the
clients
thing.
go to
Here's
Snap
the thing.
Fitness that
Here's the
morning?
thing. Did they go to Snap Fitness? Are
Right.
they members?
I could resist.
But most people when you say a foot of water, they're like, I'll never be able to fish. Chances are, you ain't fishing in a foot of a legit
No.
foot of water. 12 inches of water is this much water.
Yeah.
At that point, if that's your target area to fish, then you probably need to be on a poling skiff
You're right.
or a tonal haul or something like
A
that.
foot of water is generally in the way of us getting to where
Exactly.
we want
A
to fish.
foot of water is
Man,
going to be like where I'm going to traverse through to fish a
Right.
deep pond.
I've got to get over
or
this
to
bar,
get over a
this
bar, to
bulkhead.
get through a little cut, something like that.
Mhm.
Well, I'll
but
tell you-
on the flip side, though, and then I'll let you follow up, is running-wise, with the porter bracket combined with, the pocket in that boat,
Mhm.
and you can tab it down, and it will run in a foot of water. I mean, not, you don't want to run from here
Miles.
to the Skyway,
Yeah.
but, like jumping over
If you
some
need to get
bars
over
or
a
getting
bar.
through the
Mhm.
troughs, I got no problem. I think Jason can, back me up
Yeah.
on that it's a shallow running boat for the size and kind of what all you got going on there.
Yeah, I've run a Pathfinder now, as James does, but I ran that boat for 10 years.
Yeah.
And it is a very capable boat of running as shallow as any.
Mhm.
Floating, depending on your tank and obviously your weight distribution, it's probably not as shallow a floating boat on a floating. If your tank's in the rear, tank's in the front, it's a big difference. It's give and take. But with the porter bracket, it is nice. The good thing about the porter bracket, and I run a regular jack plate, and I was telling you the other day that I really don't miss the porter bracket as much as I thought I did. The big difference I can tell you from running a porter bracket for 10 years and going to traditional jack plate is not really how shallow I can run, but how shallow I can jump the boat up.
Yeah.
Because your prop on a traditional jack plate, you can only bring your motor up so far.
You don't get the
then you got to
setback.
trim,
Mhm.
and you can't really get on plane when you're trimming, and you got the setback too. So if the downside of porter bracket is it's not dummy proof. A lot of
No.
people that would have a problem running a porter bracket boat, you can run the motor hot, you can blow the motor up
Yep.
if you don't know how to run it, and you gotta run the motor off sound. There's no numbers like. I mean,
Mhm.
actually,
It
you know how to run a
handles
boat.
really well.
When
in the
Travis
chop,
got
man.
his boat, he's like, man, this thing's weird. He went from a traditional jack plate, and I jumped in the boat with
it's
him.
a driver's boat. I mean, you add the dead rise, you add the porter bracket,
Yeah.
and it's definitely a driver's boat. But I will say, once you get accustomed to running a porter bracket and sort of mentally get it really is. It's like your coordination and your sound and like everything. Where I can run my boat, have a conversation with a client, and I'm making
You're
adjustments to
knowing
the
what's
boat
going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
by
Well, that comes with the familiarity.
by
of it.
hearing what's going on. I'm listening to.
It's a lot different.
I tell you where it really changed, and we're kind of getting on a tangent. We'll get back to some of this, but
no, it's
when
boating.
when I
As far
got
as
in the
fishing.
tower, anybody that runs a tower boat, that's sort of where you you either know how to run your boat or you don't.
Oh,
if you've got a boat like this,
you're at that point you're away from the motor.
So everything when I got in the tower, luckily I ran the boat for quite a while without a tower.
You imagine if you got that boat with the tower when you first got it.
I could listen to the propping. I could listen to, and I haven't installed my upper GPS yet.
Gauge.
It's my sim rag because I'm gonna run my gauges through it. So I don't have water temp. I don't have trim percentage.
Yeah.
So I have no visual reference to what's going on behind me. But after running the boat for quite a while, I can listen to it and make small adjustments and get the boat. I can tell you probably about what RPM and what speed we're running at.
Yeah.
Just by listening to the boat run.
So, the other thing I wanted to add, going from a Canyon Bay to a Pathfinder and running your boat versus mine, I found something interesting, and I'm kind of with that kind of stuff, I get kind of into it. But Brian, my partner with Fish Tournaments, he's got the 2500.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a 2600. The 26 is quite a bit bigger boat overall when you look at the LOA, length overall. And I think the 26 floats shallower. And we've been in both of them and pushed the limits pre-fishing.
Well, you start playing with dynamics where you got width and
it's the width. It's a bigger boat, and the fuel tank in the 26 is dead center. Where the fuel tank in the 25 the 25 sags a little bit more in the back. Not that it's back heavy, but when you talk floating. The other thing that I do like about the Pathfinders, as far as you're talking about floating, is it's a double step tall. Well, your deepest part when you're floating is the rear. Well, as that boat goes over the sandbar, you got a couple more inches of give because the hull steps up in the back where a traditional boat would come back. And it makes a difference. They float super shallow. I was really surprised.
I noticed that. So I was a little, going through the whole Pathfinder deal and getting that boat. What I was nervous about the first time I got on it is looking at it versus my old boat and seeing them side by side on the trailer.
A lot bigger.
No way that boat floats in what my Skeeter did. I was nervous, especially when I got it home and put it right next to it. It's completely different, the entry. And then I got on the water the first time, and I was like, man, there's no way this boat drafts as shallow as that one does. That's all I could think about. And 6 weeks into it, it does. And you're right. And I think that's where I feel it is in that center portion where the step is. When I'm trying to get over, because obviously with 4 people, I'm not shooting a whole lot of bars until I get really familiar with this boat. But just idling in or getting on the trolling motor and having to get in. I've been impressed with what I've seen. I'm drafting less than I expected to. I'll say that. And I was comfortable taking on another inch or two going from that boat to the 2500 because of what I was going to be gaining in ride and size.
And I think at the end of the day, I think what you do is you really start splitting hairs at some point.
Yeah,
because that's
for
saying,
sure.
Well,
for sure.
Realistically, I mean.
The thing with my boat,
because of what we do in our boats,
we get real technical with it.
It's an advantage. It's a 30-minute advantage at some point. I mean, that's really what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because if people are out there looking at different boats, in my opinion, draft is not the most important.
No.
You're going to want to look at ride.
It's important.
You're going to want to look at fit and finish. You're going to want to look at your power. There's other things to look at. And
an inch or two, I don't think makes a difference.
I think most of the bay boats, I would say a majority of the bay boats, are going to be plus or minus, a couple inches or two.
Yeah.
As far as where you're going to be able to go, when you can go there.
Well,
and most of that is knowing where to go.
Yeah.
Or the right way to get in there.
And knowing when to get there, and
or knowing how to drive your boat. I think that's a huge problem people have is they don't familiarize themselves with their boats, and they don't know how to drive it. And then you throw in the fact that some boats will run hot. Mine doesn't. That's one fortunate thing is I can run the jack plane on 6. And with the motor I have, the Verado, they have a really good low water pickup. I don't have a heating problem. Yeah. Having a heating problem on a boat that you can't run all the way up, it really sucks even if you know what you're doing because you have to really pay attention on your height. So, the one thing I will tell you that I've learned over the years of going bigger in boats is everybody thinks, oh, that boat's 26 foot. The draft's going to be horrible. It isn't. Like, it's good, if not better, than the 24s. The bigger the boat, the more displacement of the weight,
A perfect example of that I can think of when you talk about big boat is like the T-Crafts.
Yeah.
The old
a lot of displacement because they got a lot of boat in the water.
Exactly. It's the displacement. It's the surface tension. It's how they displace that water and sit on top of it.
Somebody asked about Hanson's, too, so I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's definitely a shallow floating and running boat. It's,
Yeah.
it's a
Well, they were
flat
asked.
bottom boat.
They were asking about performance.
Yeah.
Performance on a Hanson. I never drove one.
In my
It's a-
opinion, if you want an honest opinion on performance, somebody who I think is tried and true and tested them from the in to the out is Jason Stock.
Yeah.
He's a guy that's taken them offshore and been in the backcountry with them. That'd be a good resource if you're looking to,
I can I can tell you my experience on boats. It's a flatback.
Yeah,
It's you put a 150 on it and it runs. You could probably put a 250 on it and it don't run a whole lot faster.
No.
That's
It's
right.
not a performance-based boat. I mean, that design of boat was designed for low horsepower to run shallow, and they put a V in the front so you don't get wet.
Yeah.
Right.
And then when you get in
Kinda
too big a
eats into that
chops,
chop a little
it's just
You gotta
not
put
the
You
same.
got the chines if you put the chines.
I was spending
on there.
some time in Ty's boat too. The one thing I'll give a Hanson, I mean, there's a lot of debate about the ride, but it's all about give or take. You're
Sure.
gonna give up some of the rough water ride to get a little bit in draft. But I'll tell you what's nice about it. If you're somebody who's looking for a no frills fishing boat, it's a fun layout to fish out of. It's just
Sure.
wide open. I think it's 9-foot beam. But to gain that, you're gonna trade off some things.
Yeah.
Yeah, if usually a rule of thumb, if it needs spray rails, it's probably a wet boat out of the hole. I mean, you don't see spray rails except for boats that need them.
Spray rails.
Right.
I mean, honestly,
Reason why
that's
they're there.
yeah. So one thing, to add to that, let's throw this out there. I know we're getting on a tangent. If you're looking at a boat and you wonder, is the boat dry? Is it going to perform?
Mm-hmm.
Before you buy it, don't listen to the salesman
Yeah.
because he's
Get
trying
it
to
out
sell
there.
the boat. Do a little research on dead rise on a boat. See what the dead rise is. See what the beam is. Look at the reverse chimes on the boat because all these things factor in on how the boat's going to ride,
Mm-hmm.
how it's going to cut through the chop, and is it a step tall? Is it a traditional haul? Is it a padded boat? There's a lot of stuff that you can educate yourself online. It's just like fishing now. You can go on YouTube, research this stuff, and understand what they're talking about, and then you can go look at a boat
Yeah.
and say, yeah, this is for me. Yeah, it's not for me because every boat's got a person that wants to buy it.
I mean,
but-
in my opinion, talk to a professional, not even necessarily a fishing guy, but talk to somebody that has ran the boat
Mm-hmm.
because there is no perfect boat. There is no boat out there that's going to do every single thing you want it to do.
Right.
I don't care. There's going to be something that you give up to get something
Yeah.
that's a little bit better than another one.
for sure.
And so, like we talk about on our for our customers and clients, know your expectations, and so know what you're willing to know exactly what you want, and then know that there's some things that you're not going to probably get.
Talk to a captain that's halfway educated on boats because I tell you what, we've sat at the dock and we all run different boats. Me and you're the same brand with different
Mhm.
models. And I said, Travis, man, I really do like that boat, but man, I wish I did something different for the deck.
Yeah.
Running it every day, like you know what you don't like about that
Right.
boat and what you do. Where somebody fishes out something once a week, they're not in it every day through different conditions.
Well, and there's where it goes with expectations, because if you're going to use your boat 50% for fishing and 50% for
Cruising
Yeah.
the sandbar.
the cushions and the lighted
Yeah.
cup holders and the all those things, and the nice little rounded edge here or there might not be as might not be something I want, but maybe something that you want. But
Yep.
and where all this came from is knowing how to run a boat makes all the difference in the
I'll
world.
tell you this right
So,
now. I've
if
done
you're not
more.
a boater, go with somebody who knows how to run it
Yeah.
and ride in it.
I've done more test drives probably than anybody in a Canyon Bay, and I probably sold, well, maybe Todd back when he was with him, but I've sold boats by the time we pulled back in the dock for the simple reason that I got in the boat and I showed that dude how to run it, and I showed him what it would do because I knew how to run it. And at the end of the day, me just knowing how to run that boat showed that customer how shallow is it run. I said, "Watch this, run it through stuff, not tear anything up.
Yeah.
How do you work the jack play? How does it run? This is what you." I would tell him send the guy with me before he gets in the boat. Let me
Exactly.
show him how to run the boat, so you don't get a bunch of calls trying to
Right.
trying to
Or
add, the boat
worse
sucks,
than a
whatever.
Something bad happens to that boat, because of a mistake that could have been avoided.
Yeah, because these are not cars. You don't just
Yeah.
get in and you hit drive.
Right.
They've got adjustments. It's kind of like.
And there's
I
no
mean,
brakes.
Yeah, there's no brakes. You got different props. There's a bunch of different variables in the boat that are manually controlled. So, just some good information if you are looking at boats. Boat sales right now through the roof. People are buying them like crazy. Do a
Yeah.
little research on them.
I agree.
They all
You guys
look
wanna-
shiny underneath the lights, but they're
do.
not all
Then
built
you
the
get
same.
up close. You guys want to take a quick break? I'll get us back online with the comments, and then we'll either take it back to fishing or see if these guys want to still talk boats.
Yeah, I like
Cool.
it, man. We'll
All right, guys, hang
take a little
tight.
break. Hang tight. Bear with us here for about a minute or so, and we'll be right back, guys. Talking more fishing. You're watching Tampa Fishing Outfitters live fishing report.
All right, guys, we're back. Tampa Fishing Outfitters live fishing report. You've got Travis on the end, Jason in the middle here, guys. If you see us on our phones, we apologize. We're trying to keep up with the comments you guys are throwing up here. Our computer here was down for a second. We're getting them back online now, but you know, we can kind of take this in a few different directions. You know, we kind of got on this boat conversation.
Hey, I like it.
John Gordon's last couple comments. There are actually a couple breaks offered on boats now. He says
power poles
are one.
Not high speed though.
Not high speed.
I don't know.
You'll be the knuckle man.
Yeah,
I was the knuckle man a couple times.
Yeah,
You know,
I've seen one dangling.
Before we get into anything, I went by power pole and picked up my new shoes for the boat. New boat's coming in March. What a company, man! I walked in there and it's just like they roll out the red carpet and they do that for not just me but everybody.
Customers.
You just don't hear anything about them that is negative. I mean,
they've done it right, man.
I think even Minn Kota, the Talon guys, might have left a good review for them.
I mean, it's weird. Where they hit the jackpot is like, you know, not to take anything away from Power Pole, but there are a lot of companies in the industry, you know, namely Rodan is one of them, you know. But when you pair it with a product, it's just, you know, sort of sets itself apart from everybody else.
And the service?
And then you get the service. I think that's where it really just kind of like stirs it up. You know?
People,
and
I think
I'm happy to be, you know, with Grizzly, our Rodan. You know, I mean, like we've kind of been blessed and lucky to really get some good
local companies
that make a really good product, coupled with really good support and service and
the local companies too. Man. You keep it local. You keep the money local. I mean, obviously we can't do that with everything, but you know, we're running
as much as possible.
We're, you know, the Rodans, the power poles. I use Loadmaster. You're with Peterson. I mean, it keeps it local, and there's a lot of good companies, a lot of bad ones out there too.
There is.
I was there the other day. That's why I brought that up. They really bring it every day. The guys walk in there, man. It's like the little business feeling, but they're huge. Like, I mean,
cool facility they have too.
It is.
I have been buying them things since John was selling them out of his house, and I never forget. I worked at Boatersville part-time. My wife was in school, and I remember he'd come in there. He'd just come out with a 6-footer, and I remember I'd hear people come in. And they'd be like, "Man, I don't want to put that on the back of my boat." It was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
Me being young, I was 18, 19. I was like, "Man, that's pretty cool." And he's like, "Yeah, they're like $600," and I'm like, $600. I'm like. He's like, no.
Yeah, I remember.
He's like, but he was trying to get him out. He's like, no, man. He goes, I'm gonna hook you guys up. I know you guys see people in here. He was just wanting local business, and he was real nice. And from day one that I had one in my boat, it was professionally designed, not like hacked up in the garage.
Right.
I mean, I'm going to his house and picking him up, and it was legit, like good stuff, And he just continued to just bring it. Like the next series,
I remember the first one that I got, and I was like, "It's a Bennett 351 trim tab pump."
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like, boom! I was like,
but that's one of the best pumps to this day. It's still a great workhorse.
Solid, you know what I mean? And but it was like the engineer in me. I'm like, well, what is this thing?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Bennett
I was like
trim
checking
tab
it
pump.
out. I'm like, man, he always got solenoids on here. It's like, what a basic, in theory, what a basic concept here.
Yeah.
But just the way that the arm and the knuckle and
well, Aluminum Outfitters helped kind of put that deal together.
Sanchez brothers helped do some welding on that. But a lot of people don't know that it originated right here.
Yeah,
right here in
lives
Tampa
in Brandon,
Bay, right
man.
here in Riverview area, Gibsonton area. And I tell customers that all the time. I'm kind of proud to say that. I'm like,
it's awesome.
like, these things right here are invented and manufactured right here.
Well, a lot of people really gave him
area.
flack when he came out with it because it was just different. Like nobody had anything like this. Like, he had
Right.
a can control trolling motor, and you just throw the anchor. And I think maybe in a younger generation, you're more open when you're younger. And I thought, man, this thing is freaking awesome,
But-
especially being
And
flats
think about
fishing.
it, though. I mean,
and
like, you got to think too is like, and I'm sure you guys can kind of think back. Let's be frank. Shallow water fishing, flats fishing, was not really the staple of fishing for a lot of years.
Yeah, you're
You
right.
know,
Mhm.
I mean, I can remember as a kid, going inshore and catching snook or trout and redfish. That was sort of like Plan B. I mean, like we
Yeah.
always wanted to go out. We always wanted to
Mhm.
go grouper fishing, or we wanted to go catch sharks, or we wanted to go. You wanted to go out fishing. When you move up north, say a majority of the rest of the country is deep water. Lakes and all that type of stuff, and the streams and stuff. They're not really using boats; they're fly fishing. And so my point to that is really the market that he was kind of jumping into. I mean, it was big, but it wasn't
like it is
wasn't
now.
like it is now.
You didn't have bay boats.
You didn't
Yeah,
have
well, that's
bay
what I was
boats.
gonna
You
touch
didn't
Dude,
on
it was
is-
flat. Like Action
Yeah,
Craft
flat boats
2020
and
was
center
the.
consoles.
exactly.
If you had a Maverick Master Angler or an Action Craft 2020,
Yeah.
that was like the boat.
Yeah.
In my opinion, when the fuel went up, when diesel and everything went skyrocketed
Sure.
up, and the family guy that owned the 30-foot sport fish, and it wasn't
Started
anything to
looking
go
at
put-
options.
They said, "Man, I'm going to sell my sport fish, and I'm going to go buy a bay boat and just take the family in here
Mhm.
because this is a lot easier." And then education of inshore fishing. Seeing that you can go out and catch
Yep.
20, 30, 40 fish in a day, or using live bait. All that sort of started evolving and really, wrapped the power pole up into a large demand.
Yeah.
And Power Pole's done a good job of sort of staying with it and
Yeah.
keep innovating and keep going. And I know they've got a ton of products coming out.
I will have them in a month or
You
two.
know,
I know you can't.
as-
You want to get
as-
over there and look. The engineer's going off on him. He's like, I
I
gotta come over and
want
check that stuff out.
the vision system bad, just
Yeah.
because of what I did in the past. I mean,
Well, you can come over and mess with mine.
we
We'll see if
did.
we can fry it.
That's
was
going to
a-
go on the new one?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yep. We'll have the vision.
Yeah,
We'll have the
it's,
charge. Got the poles going.
pretty good stuff.
And I tell you that in talking boats here, we've been talking fishing every week, but this is pretty cool to me. I would say I'm gonna give what is like the first bay boat you remember, like that hit the market was big, and I'm gonna say the 22 Pathfinder. That was like the boat. I was like, what's that boat doing? It was running across where the flats boats were.
Mhm.
I would have to say the 22 Pathfinder was a staple.
Pathfinder. I mean, the Action Craft. I'm trying to remember when the Action Craft when the Action.
They had
Craft,
that big-
2110.
Yep, 2110, the
That was the
24.
early 2000s.
It was
C Pro SV25 or 2100.
C-Pro came out.
Yeah,
with the
but they
one.
were more of a. They were a little different. Like I'm just for me.
Boat.
Yeah, I know, but like to me, I just remember. I'll never forget. Probably the first time I seen a Pathfinder, I was down in Inglewood, and I watched one of the 22s. Back then, a 22 was like a huge boat. You're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
whoa, look at that
Monster
thing.
on the
Yeah,
flats.
17,
Yeah.
18
dude, this
foot
guy
boat.
blew the bar out in front of Stump
Typical.
Pass, and I thought this guy's gonna stick it. It was like I mean, I
Probably
know.
Jay Withers.
I don't know. It had a tower, full tower. I'm looking at this boat just drooling, just runs right across like a foot of water. And Shearwater was another. Shearwater actually
Well,
had
Florida skiff.
it was
right?
Florida skiff
Yeah.
because Todd. I was looking at one when I first started guiding, and it was 35. It was Shearwater was 35 grand. That was but the Florida skiff was like the unfinished one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Shearwater was more like a hybrid. It was like that hybrid.
No, it's the
like
same hull.
No, same
The-
same bottom,
the which
different
one
top
now?
cap.
It's
So there
Shearwater.
was a
Like they're-
Florida skiff in the late 90s, and then
Okay, I thought you were
Shearwater.
talking about. I thought you were talking about something else.
Shearwater
Never
took
mind.
that 22Z or Z22
Yep.
or whatever it was, and that's when they did like the finished.
Todd
hatches and
Fouché had
everything.
one. That
Yes.
was his
Yeah.
first boat. I
Okay.
remember him running the
Okay.
bridge.
Because the Florida skiff looked like the inside of the first Pathfinders a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, like the 99
Yeah.
Yep.
Pathfinder 2200.
Real basic.
Yeah, it was. God,
you
how
know
the
what?
market's changed.
There's
Those
a lot of
boats-
those.
those
There's a
boats
lot
were
of those
shallow, man.
99 Pathfinders, those 2200s, out running and still for sale. Like you see
Yeah.
them in the market. That's just
That's a shallow running boat. They made a. Did they make a pocket
they made a
uh,
tunnel.
or a tunnel?
They made
yeah,
a
they made
tunnel.
a tunnel.
I drove an older one. First time I actually drove a Pathfinder, and it was you could tell the boat was really light because it hit you pretty hard. But I was impressed how dry it was. Like I mean, it hurt when you hit stuff. Especially
Yeah.
I was running a 24 every day, so and I was running Canyon Bay. But I had a customer want me to take one. I rarely do that, but I said, "Oh, we'll take it." And it was dry. I was like, "Wow!" And it was fast. I had a 175. The boat flew.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I
And
had
it
a
was
buddy
just-
down in
air
Punta
out, too.
Gorda
Yeah.
that had one. started guiding. I think he quickly got rid of it. But
Yeah.
anyhow, well, guys, I hadn't looked at any questions here. Do we got any questions?
Reports from the
through?
Big Bend Power Plant, courtesy Travis Redder, Cobia.
I saw Cobia yesterday, not at the power plant, on the flats.
Yeah.
On top of a ray, and by the time I saw him,
I'd probably say that if you're, I don't want everyone to go do it, but hey, if you're thinking about fishing, this cold front could be a good thing for the power plant. That's coming through. So something to consider if you're kind of looking at plans and you just need to get on the water. It could be a productive area. I've always been a fan of that. Right after a cold front comes through,
the power plant
kind of move in there.
The power plant for me is really deteriorated over the years since they've opened that park up. Remember, it used to be. I remember as a kid, you'd have to go out there in a full drive. It was no trespassing.
Yeah.
And since they've opened out the public, it's great. But if you think about it, think about how many cobia are probably in that power plant. There's a lot, but not a lot in terms of how many people are fishing that shoreline. And cobia aren't the smartest animals. And probably every one of them, there's 20 people out there on any given day during the winter, and they're getting pounded. So my theory is there's just not a ton of cobia out there anymore. They do catch them, but I remember when I had first started guiding, I never forget. There'd be on a cold day. There'd be Billy Nobles, Woody Gore, Mike Anderson was out there. Who else? Chet. They'd all be in their towers with the black power eel. I remember I'd be at T.A. Mahoney's. I said, I got to get these black power eels because they're freaking killing these cobia. And they'd just be idling around the flat and stroking cobia.
Yep.
And it just doesn't happen. You might see one or
the
two.
Same amount of cobia and 10 times the amount of anglers catching them. So you're going to deplete the numbers a little bit quicker. But it can still be done. I know that.
Oh, yeah.
Well, listen, if you're taking your kids fishing and it's cold, don't underestimate the bonnethead sharks. We all make fun of them.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, on a day when you get the Wisconsin guys, they're in their shorts and we're freezing, it's 30 degrees and it's blowing, so you can't sheepshead fish, you're going to do two things. And you're going to do the same thing. We're going to go fish docks, or we're going to go to the power plant with some shrimp under a cork and catch 10 or 15 sharks. And the out-of-towners like it. I don't like basing my charters on that, but the people in Florida probably aren't going to go on the days that then people from up north want to go. So
I can tell you too, and you talk about, man, you guys were talking about the power plant. And it's like, if there's one place that I can say, man, like where I sort of really grew up fishing, it would be like right there in that basin. Mm-hmm. Two of my cousins lived on Dolphin Cove, which is the first canal when you come in, and then my uncle Howard Core lived on Ellsbury. There were two houses there, Dr. Fred Taylor and the Coors. Mm-hmm. And so literally the power plant, we used to ride the three-wheeler down to the power plant and like fish, like go through the mangroves.
That's so 80s, three-wheeler.
Three-wheeler.
Yeah, the three-wheeler. We got a story about that too. My cousin Dylan got hit by my aunt on it, but ran over. But I can remember going to that flat. There's a really shallow flat that runs between Dolphin Cove all the way up to almost where the metal wall is. And, I mean, like, on a daily basis, we would walk that flat, especially in the wintertime, because that thing's bottomed out. And you could walk along there, man, and you'd see cobia and redfish
giant
and snook.
jacks.
And then all the little pockets, all the little ponds and pockets would all hold fish. And it's something that I sort of fall back on sometimes is go fishing back in those areas. Because to this day, they still hold fish if you can get back there. Because the water that's warmed up by the power plant, it
kind of holds
it flows out of that basin. I mean, even around the edges and some of the pools and the pockets around the estuary and the little preserve they built there, there's still some really good fish in there.
Absolutely.
But definitely a cool place to fish. And as a guide now, like you said, always a interesting place during the wintertime to fall back on. And
we're lucky on
this. See if we can go catch a few fish.
I will say this. I feel lucky to know the South Shore like I do. And as you – We don't get the big schools of redfish that they do in St. Pete and Sarasota and all that, but I do feel like that when the weather's crappy, we have a lot of options. On days when it absolutely is going to just suck somewhere else, we have warm water outflows, we have river systems, we have docks, good residential docks, which there are some good residential docks. We got some backcountry. We have a lot of options, man. We catch in the South Shore in particular, catch a lot of fish. We catch a lot of fish.
Like I often compare Charlotte Harbor to Tampa Bay. You guys know that. And there are two primary estuaries along the west coast of Florida. And if you look at them, they're sort of modeled very similar, where you have the Mayaca and the Peace dumping in, a big bay, a harbor, and then backcountry areas. And, the South Shore of Tampa Bay, I always look at it like Punta Gorda.
Mm-hmm.
That's just sort of the way, like the fishery, the way we have a long sandbar that runs down, and then you get the backcountry in beside it. But the other unique thing, there's two things in my opinion that make Tampa Bay a little more unique. Is we've got a 40-foot channel that I always talk about. That's one of the things that harbors our snappers, our groupers.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, and even our kingfish and our Spanish mackerel. To me, I think that's why we're a step above when it comes to that. When you compare us to that fishery,
next layer of diversity.
But it's another trick in the bag on a cold day. That's light winds. We don't have to go hide. Now, shallow, even if you can get into the shallows, it's probably going to be pretty sour, so we can run out in deeper water and get to 30, 40 feet of water, catch snappers and mangroves and grunts or whatever we want to catch.
Silver trout get in the channel.
Sugar trout. But the other neat thing about in my opinion, is we have areas where we can get a bigger boat in and fish on those lower tides. A lot of the guides down in Punta Gorda, Charlotte Harbor, they need a poling skiff or a tunnel haul to get to the fish a lot of the times on a bad day. Now, I'm sure there's obviously areas that you can get to in pockets and ponds, but I feel like with our residential canals, with some of our deep creeks that go into some of these back bays, we've got a little more flexibility when it comes to a gnarly day, not to mention our bait situation. Generally we can catch live bait. You can get that added to, being able to get into an area where fish have sort of pushed down into. You can really make something happen on a day where otherwise you're going to be sitting at the dock.
Where we run out of primarily in the bait pens and stuff we have on a typical winter day blowing 20, I'm going to say 20 knots out of the north, as long as I have my bait pinned up, the low, just drop it out. I mean, I have fished some tides that, there was 3 foot of bank, and I'm fine. The wind's blowing 20. It doesn't matter because we're right there at the mouth of a river with deep bends, deep creeks, and on them cold days, them fish just run up in there. I mean, I've had some of my best days on days where I was like, I don't know if I should do this, but I had the bait. The bait was healthy. Customers wanted to go.
And that's what's nice is, rather than having to run to an area where the fish have gone,
killing yourself.
The fish are sort of they're coming to us.
Yeah,
we get 2 times of the year like that. There's sort of coupled, but the winter and the spring.
Yep.
We get nice little short runs, and we're just fortunate to be that in the area that we're at, it really caters to the type of fishing that we offer, with the exception and the X factor of catching bait.
Yeah, bait is always, and I think we have perfected that to as much as we can with making pins and being able to hold it overnight. And
there's always
I take it you guys didn't have any bait Saturday when I saw you at the bridge because we were the only 2 boats out there.
No,
that
and I'll raise my hand on that one. He gave me the option.
I looked at Jay and I was like, "Look, man, because we came from the South Shore."
Yes, I came from Maximo O'Neill's.
So it was already hurled up coming across that bay, blowing out of the west, and we tried a couple markers. Old Stinky over here. Yeah, man, it's bait. I throw what I catch about 200 spade fish.
Hey, it was bait, just the wrong bait.
Marker, and I said, all right, dude.
You called me at whatever it was, like 7:30, 7:45, and I just made my first throw.
You're the reason why.
So Connor goes, oh, man, James is getting it.
I
we
said,
gotta
James
go.
is getting it.
Well, I just made a throw.
I
pulled in like 100 paces.
4 footers. We're going to eat 4 footers.
That's why we can't let James show us up. Let's send
Gandy. We ran to Gandy. We put the boat on the trailer. We ran to Maximo.
Yeah. It was gnarly,
a long way around. We didn't do that, but we went across and came up.
But you know what? That bait for me made the difference when I went back there and got in the first pond I was trying to get in. The bait made the difference because I had a few fish on shrimp, but the greenbacks was boom.
Yeah,
boom,
I mean, I had enough. I didn't chum. I had enough to fish with, and if we had to, but we would have both made it work if you had to. But you had canceled, but. It did make the difference. It was.
Oh,
I canceled.
He canceled.
After he went.
Yes, I went and helped him catch bait. Well, I had some. Yes. So
only would have been better than we took his boat.
Let's just rub it in, all right? So I threw the net.
Yeah.
Caught the bait, and so I ended up having 2 senior citizens that fish with me out of a fishing club in Sun City, and that day.
What in the day?
Just wasn't the day. So we booked them. I got a double on Saturday, and right after this
front.
Hopefully,
well, that's how it was for us. It was after post front. Man.
So anyway, but yeah, so it was. Yeah. It was a trip.
I was glad I was able to get some because I'll tell you, I was riding and I was about halfway. I'm riding with the waves, and that's the first time I had that boat kind of really sloppy. I was like, oh, this is not bad. And then get there, and I'm thinking, oh, this isn't bad. Hopefully, I just make 2 or 3 throws and I'll be good. And then I get there, I was like.
This is bad.
What am I going to do? And I was either turn around and go back baitless and just charge through, or figure it out. And I went through that first stall and marked so much. Really, it wouldn't have been a problem if it wasn't for the birds. If the birds didn't attack me right after that first
attack me.
I'm telling you, I had a dozen birds inside the boat while I'm on iPod. I mean, you saw what I had going on down there. And that was the second place I was at when I saw you
The
guys.
best was when you come over, right?
Yeah.
And I had just thrown, and I probably got about 100, 120 pieces. I pull it up, and James like, sardines, right? And I was like, no, it's solid white,
Yeah,
babe.
I was like,
what?
Yeah. I had to work through it. I mean, all those sardines didn't make it the ride back, beating them down like
Say
that.
it ain't
but,
so.
But, man, but I got it.
Yeah,
Hey,
it was gnarly.
Sometimes, man.
You know, them are the days, though, where having a 24, 25, 26-foot
That
boat.
makes the difference.
When
yeah.
I made them runs before, I look out the side, and we're getting beat up, and I'm going, back when I had a 22, this was the stuff that I thought I was going to die in. Like,
I ran it plenty of times.
Yeah, like
chartered out of my Triton for 5 years.
yeah,
22-foot boat.
it's. I
But
mean, it's good for what it is.
We've been talking Pathfinder and Canyon Bay, but I'm going to fall back on something because I ran that boat for 5 years. And
Triton?
I will say
It's a good riding boat.
that the Triton, you know, the 22 and the 24, the LTS,
It's a good boat.
I tell you what, man,
They just don't have resale.
it's a
They
really
really
good
don't.
running boat.
The
It's a
resale's
very
horrible on
solid
them.
boat. It's not a fast boat. It's a heavy boat, but it rides really, really well.
I haven't been in
will
a
say that.
24. I've been in yours, and it was tough for me to give it a fair judge because
Well, it's not
I was
apples to
used to
apples.
24.
It's
When you
not
go
apples to
back,
apples.
it's like, wow, you know.
Yeah.
But I tell you, it did ride good. Actually, I got in there. I was like, this thing rides pretty good. It's just you getting a 22, and it just feels it's like going from a F-150 back to a Ranger. You're like, all right.
Once you get into a
That's
certain,
just the dynamics of the length of the boat
Yeah.
And
has
the
a
la-
big impact.
and the distance between the waves.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you start. That's
can
what
cross
you notice.
more.
You know,
Yeah.
exactly. So especially on a west wind going to the Skyway Bridge from our area.
Oh,
Man.
If they're gonna hurl up,
Still hurting.
they're gonna hurl up right before they hit you when you're trying to go to the bridge because they've already came from St. Pete and they're just building.
we were taking them over the bow, the
so-
transom, the bow, and I'm like, we threw one more time. I was like, Travis, I got enough. Dude, let's get out of here, man. This is start. It got worse after you left a little bit.
Yeah,
Like,
it was pretty gnarly.
I think it started shifting out of the north
Yeah.
at that point, and I'm like,
It
oh
did.
my
It did.
god.
That's what I was telling. Because we were at the end of the pier
Yeah.
and you could literally,
I
in the
get-
20, 30 minutes we were there, they started
it.
hurling up over the
Mhm.
pylons.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, dude, man.
It was.
I'm trying to throw, and like, he goes, throw. I go, I can't.
Yeah.
Dude. I'm like,
Well,
I gotta wait.
That's the first time in any of the boats I've been in since I started guiding where I was throwing the net from inside the cockpit
Yeah.
of the boat. Generally, I'm on a deck,
Yeah.
and I was like, let me just stick to the cockpit.
You fall in with 20 pounds
Nope.
connected to your wrist, you're in
Yeah.
trouble, man.
Yeah.
If there's one place I wouldn't want to fall in, it would be at the Skyway Bridge.
There's a lot of.
I would rather fall in my opinion, like at one of the range markers or something.
You can grab the marker or
That would
something.
give me
You got a ladder you can climb
That'd give me
up.
like 8
Yeah.
miles of float to
Yeah.
get to a pole,
Listen,
Yeah.
dude, if I come out there and you climbed up the range marker, I'm going to rescue you.
bro.
But you might as well just lose my number because once I know you're safe,
Bro,
it's going to be.
I'll rock it. Just give me some bait.
You imagine going to
Yeah.
the marker and Travis like, man, I fell off my boat and he's sitting on the marker and you got to rescue him.
Dude.
Throw him a sandwich and a Coke.
Hey, so here's a real story, and I don't know where this is going, but this is something that really happened, and Rick and I just talked about it the other day, and it's sort of serious.
Yeah.
So I went to one of the markers to get some bait, and I sucked up a cast net by myself.
Yeah, good.
Sucked
good.
up
Mhm.
sucked up a cast net in my prop.
Wasn't your cast net.
Wasn't my cast net. It's a long story, but I sucked up somebody's cast net off a marker. I got the hand line that was hanging off. And
Yeah.
It came up, floated up, and I did a loop around the marker. I sucked it up, and I pulled the whole net off the marker. So it shut my boat down. I threw my anchor out immediately. Got set up on anchor so I could deal with it by myself. There's no boats in sight. Probably 20-mile-an-hour winds.
Mhm.
So I started kind of figuring out what I was going to do, and tried to cut a little bit out. Got a little bit of it cut out, but I really needed to get on the back of my boat and kind of lay back and cut this stuff
Get
out
it
of my
all
prop
freed
to
out.
get it off.
Mhm.
And so I did. I climbed on my power pole brackets, leaned up against it, and was sort of had a knife and I was cutting a little bit of it out. But it was pretty gnarly. I mean, I'm going up and down, and in the moment, I'm like, man, I got to get bait. I got to, everything's on my mind about running my trip and my clients and how am I late, et cetera, et cetera. So I had to stop for a second. I go, you know what, this isn't safe, man. So I jumped off, got back in the boat, and actually I called Rick, let him know where I was at, what I was doing, because I knew you guys were fishing and he was at his house. I said, this is what's going on, just in case something happens. And the first thing I did was I went to my anchor locker and I got my anchor out, or I got my anchor rope out, my anchor line that's got a buoy on the end of it, like for tarpon fishing. So what I did was I brought all that line up to the back of the boat, tied it off on the back of the cleat, and I threw that buoy out with the line on it. And the reason I did that, and I put another dock line out on the other side, kind of draping back. The reason I did that was because if I did fall in, I knew that all I had to do was swim everything I had between the buoy and my boat, and I'd get a line, and I'd be able to pull myself back to my boat.
Right.
And so the only reason I say that is, I mean, maybe that wasn't the best thing I could have done or the worst, whatever, but in my mind, I had an out. I sort of thought, like, if I fell in, tide's ripping out, there's nobody out here, at least I could do is swim between my boat and that buoy, and I'm going to be able to hold on to something. If it takes me everything I got, as long as I can get to there.
Yeah.
So just a little idea for you out there. If
well,
you
I
come
think that
across
also
a situation
speaks to
like that,
the situation you're talking about, but that also speaks to some, as boaters and anglers, I think that we owe it to each other to, when we lose equipment or leave behind a crap, whenever possible, try to
get it back.
Try to get those dangers out of the way. Because
but to whoever left that net, it might have been rough when they, they could have.
Totally.
No hard feelings for whatever. It's probably your net. But what had happened was, you could see. I mean, I shouldn't say because I didn't see it, but once it all took place, I mean, I saw a bunch of like muck come off the marker, like off the poles. So I know what happened was somebody threw a net. It was a 1/4-inch net, and it got hung on a pole, but it was high. Like it got stuck up high. They probably could have got it off if they would have got closer, but probably rough or whatever. And so the net, instead of it, a lot of times we lose them and then we let them go all the way down. This net was like high on the marker.
Yeah, like
so
it threw it too close.
Floats.
Right.
And it's
the tide brings it back.
And so I caught the hand line. The only reason I know is because the hand line was like all the way up by my motor, and then the net and the lead was back on my prop. So I had to have sucked that up first, and then it just brought everything with it. And once it did that, I was toast. But
I saw a similar thing unfold at Skyway a few days before I'd seen you guys out there with another captain who was trying to do his bait thing by himself, and his anchor got a cast net.
We got a good question there. It says, any reason why not to tie yourself off to the boat? I guess that's a pretty good idea.
For me personally, I guess if it would have been, maybe a little more rough, or maybe I couldn't get a hold of somebody to let them know. In that particular situation, I felt like I took my boots off.
Yeah.
I took my boots and my bibs off because I had my boots and my bibs on. So
just need something to help you sink.
And my bibs off.
Right, that's all you need.
And the other thing that I did, and I told you, was I took my power poles. They're owed power pole. I honestly would not have been able to get it off if I didn't have the power pole brackets, because I wouldn't have been able to get to my motor with the porta bracket. I wouldn't have been able to reach.
And you didn't have your trolling motor either, did you?
I didn't have my trolling motor.
Oh. Why didn't you call me?
So I knew you guys had just picked up. I just passed you. But if I wouldn't have been able to get a hold of Rick, I would have.
Would have drove out there and helped you.
So, but anyhow, it was cool. So anyhow, what I did was I took my power poles and I sort of cracked them just a little bit, and I ran 2 dock lines in between my power poles.
Make that like a little
thing
to hold on to.
And it was kind of like a little hammock.
I've done that before.
Biggins McGillicuddy over here, you'd have probably busted your power poles, but
yeah, possibly.
My little butt, I was able to hang back there. I was deadly.
Little butt. You've been in the gym for 2 weeks. Now you're small. Come on.
Deadly catching it up back there.
Come on.
That out, man. But anyhow, I don't know where we got to that conversation, but I thought
Be safe.
It was kind of, a lot of times this time of year, there's not a lot of boats on the water.
Right.
And there are a lot of guys that go out by themselves.
There's always the horror story this time of year.
And, just take the extra second and slow down and go, you know what?
Right.
This
Let me make sure I've got this.
What I'm doing. I mean, yeah, it's easy.
Second guess yourself.
Make sure you set those steps up in place. I talked about this a couple years ago where wearing the
we need to start doing that.
The life packs, and I did it for a while, and during tournament season, I actually moved both my packs to the skiff.
Yeah.
And I never moved my one back to my canyon, but I normally always keep one on there in those conditions. Put it on. Put that waist pack on. And the reason I say a waist pack is you can put it on,
still do everything you need to do.
Spin it around backwards, and you can still throw the net and do everything you would normally do. But all it takes is 5 seconds, man, and not even.
Yeah, it can be dangerous out there. Just be safe, guys. Slow down. For us, we're always in a rush because we're on a time schedule. But sometimes we just have to. Okay, we'll be late. let's just be safe.
Right.
And
Right.
that, you got to step back and think about it.
When I've never had a client that I called and said, "Hey, I'm going to be whatever minutes late."
It happens all the time.
They've never said, "Oh, well, what, are you kidding me?" No, they'll be.
Oh no, I thought you meant you've never called one and said you'll be late.
Oh no, I've never.
Well,
had
you're on a
bad
pretty
experience.
good stretch,
No.
bro.
My problem is I'm running
I've been
2
late.
trips in the spring when it's tough, and then bait's tough, and you're
You
just
know,
like,
it's. I always tell clients too, man.
They've always been understanding.
You know, and that's one of the in that booking process. They're like, "What time should we be there?" I'm like, "Well, listen,
get there
this
9:30.
isn't exactly a flight.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I may be an hour early. I may be 10, 15, 20
arrivals
minutes.
might be
30.
more on time than flights.
Probably.
Even as late as we can be
That's
sometimes.
the truth. But yeah, and you're right. You know, always have a way to get back in the boat, Manny, for sure. Braden asks, can we get some tips on catching snook and redfish? I would say snook you wouldn't have a problem. Now, keep in mind that we're on the South Shore, Tampa Bay. I'm not sure where you're located at. So depending on the areas, particularly this time of year, as water temperatures have dropped and we're in our quote-unquote winter time, different areas are going to have different, techniques and tactics and places where these fish are going to go for refuge and seek warmth. But as a generalization, the snook are primarily going to be in residential canals, deep muddy bottom bays, rock piles.
Yeah.
Even some of if up to the north of us, a lot of guys are catching them on oyster bars and creeks, hard bottom creeks.
Something that's going to radiate some warmth to those
Something
fish.
that's going to keep those fish warm. The snook is a subtropical species. So
and Braden, maybe even shoot us a message and let us know where your general area is, and maybe we can help you out a little bit.
Okay, so St. Pete. Okay, so I would say you are in the heart of residential canal fishing.
Yeah.
All the canals and residential docks should be holding. Now, maybe not every dock, and that's another thing. People think, oh, I went to a dock and I didn't catch anything.
Yeah.
Well, it's just like fishing a flat. If you take the docks away, take all the docks and remove them from the water, that's the first place I start.
Yep.
Where's the shallow part of that canal? Where's the deep part of that canal? Is there a drop-off? Is there a bend?
Oysters.
And then, exactly. Go to vegetation. Is there mangroves? Is there oyster bars? If that all, you can't really pick and choose from that, then you start breaking it into, sailboats, fillet tables, big boats, small boats, floating docks. You try to put a pattern together in an area where the fish are going to want to stage up. And that just, in my opinion, comes with experience. Fishing a lot of residential canals, a lot of times, if it's an area that I haven't fished in, and a pretty small amount of time, you can kind of go down a canal and figure out, is this a dead canal?
This looks better.
Or is this canal got some life in it?
Yeah.
And, I look for lights. You can look for dock lights that hang over the edge. Even if you're fishing during the day, it's a technique that I use. I mean, especially if you know where underwater dock lights or dock lights are.
Yeah.
And those dock lights are attracting fish at night. Odds are those fish are not far away during the day.
Right.
If it's a deep water canal, those fish are probably laying down on the bottom, or they've settled over to a flow point where they can feed. So I don't know if that helps you, but that's where I would focus this time of year, especially
100%.
in St. Pete, is residential canals. As far as redfish, I'd say follow that same pattern. I know this time of year, a lot of those flats will hold redfish, especially in the sand holes in the pockets. Depending on the tide and what kind of boat you're using, you can get onto some of those flats and sort of survey heavy flow areas that have a lot of vegetation, heavy grass, and flow. Chances are those, and with deep water close, that's where the redfish are going to be, or those residential canals.
And honestly, Braden, we talk. I think redfish and snook are in our wheelhouse, man. And I know this might not be the answer you're looking for, but watch the show. I think at some point or another throughout the year, every week, snook and redfish are going to come up as a discussion point. So we're going to continue to talk about it. You could even go back to earlier portion of this show. I noticed you joined kind of halfway through. So
check out our YouTube page. It's like a
YouTube
vault
page.
for our shows. We got shows going back when we're actually in the radio studio.
We do, yeah. There's a ton of stuff on there. We're actually a few minutes over, but we'll finish up here, guys. We'll answer Braden's question because I think he's got a good one there. He asked us hard baits or soft plastic. So I'll throw a couple at you for right now. soft plastics would be my go-to.
Absolutely.
313 gold
and
glitter.
313 gold glitter DOA Cal is what I would recommend.
I
But
like flipping with a shrimp for some reason.
but
sharks.
hard plastics, like, you can't beat a DOA or a Miralure or Miradine right now, or Miradine, whatever you want to call it. But that bait mimics a live greenback
Better than
so perfect that if you're in an area, especially with snook or trout, that's a good bait to use. But what I've found is you're going to want to use that bait when those fish are a little more active, when they're up searching. And the nice thing about a soft plastic is you can use it throughout the day. I always tell people, I was like, my soft or my hard plastics, my top waters, they're sort of situational baits for me. Like, this looks like it'd be a good top water bite. You throw the top water. This looks like it'd be a good twitch bait spot where there's high flow or the fish are really active and you got it around a school, et cetera, et cetera. But if you can master the soft plastic, it's the only thing you need in your bag most of the time.
Sure.
So I
I
think we'd all agree on that.
Yes. Let's
I
go
also agree it's time to eat.
Yes,
to
I'm
eat.
hungry. Boys, we're going to close this thing out. We appreciate y'all all tuning in.
Yeah.
But we are fat and hungry. So with that being said, tight lines, and we'll see you guys next week.
Next week.
See you guys.